Okay, it's okay now. Please go ahead, Doanh.
Okay, welcome everybody to our second session of Lean Construction Executive Education Program. Today, we're going to talk about Introduction to the Last Planner System. The same thing as last time. Feel free to ask any questions you want, type into the chat box. We're going to have some time to go over your questions. Also, we're going to have some time for you to open up and start talking towards the end as well. So today, I really want to give a really strong introduction to the Last Planner System. This is the foundational method for lean construction. And this is something that a lot of people have varying levels of understanding. And a lot of times people just pick and choose parts of the last planner system. So today I really wanted to give a overview of the entire system and show you how the pieces of the last planner system come together. So this is the agenda, right? The agenda is that we're going to go through what is the last planner system. And we're going to break it into the core components. So last planner system is really a system that's comprised of several parts. And we're going to talk about each of those parts, including visual communication, daily huddles, look ahead and make ready, percent plan complete, master scheduling, full planning. And we're going to talk about how the 10 ways interfaces with the last planner system, why you should use it, and also when and where is it appropriate to use last planner system. We're going to end up with talking about reliable promises and how better communication leads to better projects and better planning. So a little bit background on myself. I started in the lean construction community in 2010, and I worked under Glenn Ballard, who's the founder of lean construction. And in the early days, we were doing research on target value delivery of projects. So we were writing the case study for the 5 major projects in the Bay Area. And I've been involved with more than $10 billion of projects. That number keeps increasing. And I'm the co-founder of the Lean Construction blog, as well as I'm part of the industry council of the Project Production Institute. So all these initiatives are designed to make lean construction more accessible and also to make understanding how to apply lean construction easier for the industry. So in the very last webinar, we talked about levels of lean capabilities and sophistication, right? Today, we're going to talk about the first star, which is the last planner system, 5S, visual management. Throughout the webinar series, we're going to learn a little bit about each of these parts. So once you get through the 6 webinars, you will have a very strong understanding about where you are in terms of the lean capabilities curve, and also understand what you should be focusing on. So today, we're going to look at last planner, 5S, and visual management. This is the foundation, because these methods can be used on every project, whether it's design bid build, progressive design build, IPD. All types of projects can use these methods. Therefore, this is where we always want to tell teams to start first. And what is the last planner system, right? So in the middle, you have the diagram. This is the diagram that shows the entire system in all its parts. We look at the top, we see the master planning, there's phase planning, make ready, commitment planning, daily huddles, learning. You also see how we define milestones, phase planning, look aheads, weekly weekly commitments, dailies, and then root cause analysis. That's the very, I would say, correct version. But before we get to the more complicated version, which is in the center, I want you to focus on the version on the right side. The right side is what we start with first, right? So last planner system is really a combination of planning, preparing, scheduling, doing, and learning. What makes last planner system different from most planning systems is that there's a greater emphasis on preparing and learning. And most of the time, we do not realize that preparation and learning is part of the planning process. And we're making this more explicit in the last planner system. And this is kind of the value of last planner system is making these areas that are not commonly used in other systems more more up to the surface, and we'll talk about all these parts, right? So with lean construction, we really have layers, right? We have the philosophy, the principles, the methods, and the tools. Whenever I teach somebody a method or an idea about lean construction, I always start with the philosophies and principles. So today we're going to talk about the principles of last planner system. From the principles, we're going to see how they connect to the methods and how we can apply this on projects. So these are just good planning and scheduling principles. Again, I want to go over this. And the goal here is that let's see if we agree that these are ideas that we should implement on our projects. And from the agreement that we should be doing these things, this is actually how we connect them to the Last Planner System application. The first one is collaborative planning. Plan with those who will actually perform the work, the last planners, rather than relying solely on a top-down planning process or person. Number two, pull planning. So work is planned backwards from milestones. So we start with the milestones first, and then we pull from the milestones to create a logical set of activities. Three, reliable promises. You want your project team to make commitments to complete specific tasks by agreed upon dates, which creates a greater sense of accountability and trust. Number four, constraint removal. Before you put work into the weekly work plan and the daily work plan, you want to remove obstacles for working on those tasks. So we want to address the obstacles and constraints before we put them on the weekly schedule. And this is done through a make ready process. So these are just four good planning and scheduling principles. Number five, continuous improvement. We want to get regular feedback and adapt the plan based on performance metrics and the feedback of how things are working. Number six, we want to plan in greater detail as the work. We want to plan in greater detail as these as we approach the date that we're doing the work. So if your project task is a year away, you want to plan in less detail than if it's tomorrow or next month. So as you move close to the date of executing the work, you want to have greater details in your planning, because having a very precise plan for the 2 years from now doesn't actually help you, because there will be a lot of changes between now and then. Number seven is workflow reliability. We want to create a system that creates predictable and reliable and stable work throughout the process. By having stable work, we eliminate chaos and we make it so that people can focus on the right things. Number eight is transparency. We want to promote open communication and visibility of project progress amongst all team members. So we want to have one plan for the entire project. We don't want to have a secret plan for the general contractor, a secret plan for the trades, a secret plan for the owners. We want to have one plan, make it transparent, and communicate on that plan. Otherwise, we don't have the same information to work with each other on. Number nine, decentralized decision making. Empower the frontline managers to make decisions about the specific work areas. Replan as necessary to adjust the plan to the realities of the unfolding future. And then finally, number 10 is that we need to understand that planning and scheduling are different things. A lot of people use the words interchangeably. And in this presentation, we will actually define what is planning, what's scheduling, and why they're different. And by having a more precise language, we actually can work better together. So these are just the 10 planning and scheduling principles. Do you disagree with this, or does this generally feel correct to you? You know, that we should be using these ideas on projects.
Feels correct
If there's
to me.
any, yes, go ahead, Betty.
Yeah, it feels correct to me because, you know, with a team that's learning together, that means they're going to learn to have each other's backs. That means they're going to develop trust. When we're transparent, we're still continuing to develop trust among the whole team, the owner, the contractor, the design team. When we empower people at the front line to make decisions, we tend to not have bottlenecks, and we basically empower different levels to make different decisions in whatever's appropriate. So.
Okay, great. And this does not require any particular project delivery method, and it does not require any level of sophistication. So all projects can use these 10 principles. And that's the goal of the Lean, is that we want to have ideas that can be used on small projects as well as large projects. And but how we apply that would change based on the project conditions, but we want to have a set of principles that we can use on all size projects. So let's continue. So basically, the first important thing about Last Planner System is that we want to have the information visual. You want to make sure that you have the same information for everybody. So visual management is really about communicating who's doing what, where, and when. This allows every single person to see the work and be able to improve it. It allows us to identify risks and opportunities. And by having the information available already, we can actually have shorter meetings rather longer meetings. Humans are visual. We can see and process information faster when it's color-coded and visual. So just by making your information visual, you now have more people that can participate in the work. When it's not visual, there is a miscommunication in understanding what's going on. And also, people have a harder time understanding where they should be working every single day. So what should be visual? These are just some guidelines for you to think about how to improve the visual planning of your project, right? We want to make sure that the production plan is visual. The plan should be broken into zones and trades, so you understand clearly who's doing what, where, and when. Look ahead and constraint removal. In the last planner system, we assume that there's constraint on the work unless we explicitly say that the constraint has been removed. We also want to visually plan the logistics plan. Logistics plan includes the site deliveries, laydown space, parking, routes that trucks take in and out of the projects. A lot of these things are on projects not visual or not even well planned. Therefore, there's chaos or miscommunication when these drivers come in and try to deliver materials. So laydown space means that you have to have space for every single crew that's working on a project, and it has to be labeled by the crew. We also want to make sure that the learning and improvements that we're doing is visual. So we want to show respect to the workers, that we're listening to them, and we're writing down what their ideas are and how we can implement those into projects. And we want to use colors because people like colors. And visual communication is a skill that we need to develop over time. So this is just an example of what can happen on a project. Each team will be slightly different, and we let the teams develop their own visual planning and visual communication based on their how they want to use that information. So daily huddles. So we talk about visual information and visual communication, right? That's where we keep the information about what we're working on. Daily huddles are what we do to communicate who's working what, where, and when. So these are short 15-minute huddles in the beginning of the day. And the idea is that you want to have very focused questions, 60 to 120 seconds for each person, asking them what they're working on, where they're going to work, how many crews are going to be on site, what are their constraints, what materials are coming in, and what problems they foresee. These very short meetings allow us to have, instead of long meetings, a clear understanding about where and what's happening. And we do the daily huddles in the exact same place where your visuals are, because you want to have all your information in a centralized location so that people clearly understand. And also you allow people in the morning to tell you about constraints and things that are coming up so that you have a plan and you are prepared for it during the day. Look ahead and make ready, right? So depending on the size of your projects, you'll look ahead maybe 3 weeks to 12 weeks in the future. And why do we have a look ahead? Because we want to understand what's happening and what's going to prevent us from doing the work and what's going to stop the work from being efficient and reliable. So these things could include equipment, labor, materials, prerequisite work, information, decisions, drawings, permits. And really it's up to the superintendent and the project managers to understand what is happening in the next 3 to 12 weeks ahead of time. Otherwise, we reactively plan and we actually try to solve problems. With a look ahead and make ready process, we're proactively looking to the future and making sure that we are putting the things that we need in place before the work takes place. Percent plan complete. So as we are putting the work that we're gonna do next week onto our production plan and schedule, we want to know, are we actually accomplishing what we're planning? And how many tasks we're planning versus how many we're completing? That gives us our PPC. In general, we want to have 100% PPC because we want to have reliable work. And nothing should be put on the weekly work plan until the constraint has been removed. And when there is a low PPC or there's an issue with the work, we want to understand why it happens. So Glenn Ballard, when he first started studying last planner system, he looked at PPC and he found out that PPC is correlated with the productivity of projects. And on average, most projects actually have a PPC of about 54%. So you go to any random project throughout the world, your PPC on average is actually 54%. And as we increase PPC, we improve productivity, we improve flow of the work, and we actually get higher safety. So the target of PPC is always 100%. We don't always hit 100%, but our target is always 100%. And then, so basically now we kind of have a better understanding. This is our first pass of understanding the last planner system. So I presented some ideas, right? Visual management. I presented daily huddles, make ready process, and PPC. That's the very basic foundation of last planner system. And now that we have this general understanding, we're gonna actually go deeper in our second pass of last planner system. Before we continue, I want to open up for you guys to ask some questions about what we presented so far. And is there any questions on or clarification you want on the material so far?
It seems like sometimes it's really good to have a coach. Is there, does every project need a coach?
I would say that yes and no. So if you have like a project that's less than $100 million, I think that the superintendent and the project managers should be coached through the corporation. So you should have your internal coach that coaches all the major supers and project managers to understand how to apply this. But when your project is let's say 100 million to several $billion, I would say that you should have an external coach, or the coach should come from either the construction management company, or it can come from the owner, or it can come from the general contractor, just to make sure that the team understands how to do this. Because even if you educate the team on last planner system, it's very rare that somebody would have the discipline to put all this together. And also they don't have the context to understand how well they're doing things. And the coach might not have to be there all the time. They may only be there once every 2 weeks, once every month, but you need somebody independent of the team to give an assessment about what's happening, because otherwise the team would think that they're doing last planner very well without an understanding about where their weaknesses are.
Okay, thank you.
Did I answer your question?
Yes, you did. Thanks very much.
Yeah. And I think I would say that in a region, like you're in Southern California with DPR, right? There should be a
Yes.
regional manager who just goes to projects at least once a month to make an assessment and to give recommendations on a team on how to improve, because otherwise the team has no idea how well or not well they're performing. Because if you're on a project that's $500 million or $1 billion, you're there for 5 to 10 years, and it's very hard for you to have context about what's outside of your project.
Great, good to know. Thank you.
Okay, any questions from the Vietnamese or our international visitors so far?
We lead that. Can you? I invite you. Yeah.
Excuse me, Chung?
So from me, I just wonder whether the visual methods approach is only for lab planner, or other lean technique also have that same concept, Yuan?
Yes, so visual management is a way to communicate information. Planning and scheduling and with last planner system is one of the informations that you're going to have visual. So all the other methods require visual management, whether we're looking at target value delivery, choosing by advantages, or we're looking at even our clash detections. We want to have visual indicators about what's happening. So every lean method is built based upon visual communication of information. So it's not just last planner system, but today we're talking about last planner system. So we're using it to connect it together, but you should have your key decisions visual. You should have your learning visual, your planning and scheduling visual, your production planning visual, and your costs over time visual, and even your BIM tracking and the issue log visual. So a lot more things can be visual, because when we're working on a project with more than 100 people, what I found out is that if you require someone to log into a software to find information, most people will not be able to log in. So when you have more than 100 people, we just want to have the information up there for everybody to see. And we have to consciously update that information every week or every month, depending on what information we have. So the most important thing about information is it has to be up to date. So you have to have a cadence of updating the information weekly or bi-weekly or monthly. But that's a very good comment. Any other questions? And we can continue if you have no more questions, and we can, always talk more at the end. Okay, so the diagram on the right side right here is our simplified version of last planner system, right? We have planning, preparing, scheduling, doing, and learning. Now that we went through that part, we're gonna have enough context to talk about all the components in the middle, because the middle is really the full system. And we're gonna go through all the components of the last planner system for you to see how they fit together into one holistic system and to see why you need all parts of it. Because a lot of times people and teams, they pick and choose what they do. And in doing so, they're not fully applying last planner system. They're applying a subset of it, which could give them better results than if they're not. But they're missing out on a lot of things. They're missing out just one of the components. Okay, so this is the master planning, and this is at the very top of the process. So you're working on a new project. I would start with master planning, but if you're working on a project that's already running, you may start with look aheads and you may start with daily huddles. But this is for a product that's like brand new. You start with master planning, right? So master planning, what we want to do is have a high level understanding of what the project is going to look like from the beginning to the end. And simply what we do is we talk to the stakeholders and say, what are our key milestones? And we put those in red, in the diamonds in red. So those are key milestones. On a project that's long, you can have between 5 and 10 to 15 milestones. And those milestones in between is going to have more work. We want to understand what are the key milestones and handoffs to know how we're performing throughout the project, right? So those are going to be in red. Milestones are typically not going to be moved unless the stakeholders allow you to move it. So milestones are fixed unless the stakeholders allow you to move, because moving the milestones is actually very, very important. We generally don't want to move it unless there's an agreement to move it. Milestones will all be moved eventually, because you planning years in the future doesn't guarantee that it's going to happen that way. They will be moved, but you have to move them based on the customer. From your milestones, you want to collaboratively plan within the milestones. So this is where your pull planning will take place in between your milestones, and you're planning backwards from the end of your milestones, from one milestone to the beginning of the other milestone. And the hint here is that before you do your master planning, you want to educate people on what the master planning is and the milestones are, and you want to give them about 30 days to prepare. So that means that you have to give them guides, checklists, and make sure people come prepared. And that day, you can plan for a few hours for people to really work together. But if you don't give them a 30-day notice, they will not come prepared and know what they're doing. And if they're not prepared, then actually you waste that time. So a lot of teams end up wasting time because they do not give people enough time to have their have an understanding about what's within the milestones and come prepared. So phase planning and pull planning, right? So these happen in between the milestone. So after you determine the milestones and you have a general understanding of what's happening inside of it, you want to have a detailed phase planning. And these are typically done for 3 to 6 months at a time. And again, same rules apply, right? You want to give people about 30 days to prepare. Give them checklists, give them guides, make sure they all understand who's involved and what the work would look like in that milestone. This is more detailed than milestone planning, and we still work backwards. Why do we work backwards? Because when we plan forward, it's very easy for us to miss a step or miss a constraint or miss a logic. We plan backwards because backwards planning allows us to really, really logically understand all the things that takes place. And the goal of the phase planning is that we're going to first plan and then we're going to schedule. So this is the difference between a plan and a schedule, right? A plan includes the trade, the task, the handoff, and the sequence. So we want people to talk about that first before you even talk about crew sizes, duration, and dates, because the last 3 is more detailed. So we want to first talk about the first 4 and then add in more details if we need to add in those details at that meeting. The next part is look ahead and make ready. We talked about this previously. We want to have a 3 to 12 week look ahead in the future because we want to identify constraints that stop us from being able to do the work. And one of the hints that I have for most teams is that you have to have 1 or 2 meetings just for look ahead and make ready every week. At least 1 or 2 meetings, even if it's a small project. And you have to talk to each trade about what they're working on in the future and what constraints are occurring for them. And the reason why we're teaching you to have meetings dedicated to each component of the last planner system is that if you don't create meetings for the team on very particular scope of work or scopes of the last planner system, you end up having a meeting where people just start talking randomly. So all these little components that we're learning, you have to create your weekly plan onto your schedule, and the meetings have to align with the words and have to align with the tasks and the things that you're trying to accomplish for each of those meetings. So weekly schedule, right? So we move from planning to schedule because the difference between planning and schedule is that planning does not have the look ahead. Once you have the look ahead, then you're actually at scheduling. So here we're at a weekly schedule, right? This is the detailed schedule about what each trade is doing, including the task, duration, handoffs, and conditions of satisfaction. And you wanted your tasks to be assigned by trade and by day. So the trades understand what they're doing. They understand, make sure that they have made ready their work before they put it into the weekly schedule. And the schedule includes which trade is doing the work, where, on which day, and how many crews they're gonna have. So typically we recommend that a team has to have at least an hour weekly scheduling meeting with just to make sure that people understand the weekly schedule. And during the daily huddles, you're talking about the weekly schedule and you're talking about the daily schedule. So from the weekly schedule, you have the daily schedule. Daily schedule includes each worker. So now we're in more detail. Each worker, where they're working, when are they working, how long they're working, what's the conditions of satisfaction between the handoffs of one worker to another worker. We confirm all these during the daily huddles. And then when there's deviation or learning, we talk about this at the end of the day or in the beginning of the day, depending on your project. And then visuals, right? So same thing. Visual management is where your daily huddles are. You keep your daily huddles short because your information that you're asking for is the same information, and everybody's trained to answer the standard set of questions. I want to keep it 15 minutes because you take too long, people don't want to do it. And most projects, they do a morning huddle, 15 minutes. They do an afternoon huddle, 15 minutes. And usually they do both because they're asking for different things. The morning huddle is what are you going to work on? Where are you going to work? What's happening? The afternoon huddle is like what happened that day. Because if you wait until the next day to ask them what happened, they forgot. And you want to capture that information so when they go home, they don't have to think about the work anymore. So that's the last planner system component, right? So now we have a strong sense of all the pieces: master planning, phase planning, make ready, commitment planning, daily huddles, learning. And we see that you have to put all these together because if you don't put them together, they don't work because you're missing one piece. The system doesn't actually operate. And you have to understand exactly what you're doing for every meeting. So when you're doing a master planning session, your calendar invite has to say master planning session. And you're doing a phase planning session, your calendar invite has to say phase planning session. And you also have to include what milestones you're planning that phase in between, who's involved, and what preparation do they have to have before they meet, and also a video about what a phase planning looks like. So we're giving people a lot of information so they know what they're preparing and they send the right person. Because the worst thing that happens is that you have a phase planning meeting and one of the trade partners sends the wrong person. That person does not have the ability to understand what the work is like. They can't make the commitments. They don't understand the scope of work. They're just sent there because their boss needed somebody to attend the meeting. So these things actually lead to inefficient projects. So what we're trying to do is take all these components of the last planner system, break them into smaller meetings, and have those be very focused on a project. And over time, the team knows what the meetings are for and why they're doing it. So it's very easy for the teams to efficiently apply this. So you look at a project that's doing last planner system, right? One of the first things I ask people is, okay, can you show me your weekly calendar for the project? And do you have these components onto your calendar? If so, show me where they are and how they're working. If the team does not have this, that means that they may or may not be doing last planner, or they're just doing last planner, but they're not very organized about it. So we're trying to create first organization and understanding that how they're going to do these things together. And then we're going to improve the quality. So we first want to make sure that these pieces are put in place first, and then we improve quality and questions and also thinking within each of these components. So we did talk about this earlier, but there is a distinction between planning and scheduling, right? And really the distinction here is that planning is master planning and phase planning. There are no dates for activities, just trade sequences and handoffs. And the only dates that we have is going to be the milestone dates. Before we move it to scheduling, we have to do a look ahead and a make ready process. And the scheduling includes crew sizes, duration, and dates. So you can't schedule until you remove all your constraints. And we also want to communicate the difference between planning and schedule, because this allows us to really have a precise language. When you tell me it's on the schedule, that means you're telling me that you already did the look ahead and your constraint removal. If you tell me that you're planning, it tells me that you've done only just the trade sequences and handoffs. Because if you don't communicate this well with the team, they will have a misunderstanding, and also it's hard to understand how far along the activities are in terms of the planning and scheduling. So these are some common mistakes from a pool planning session. So can you spot the difference? A lot of teams do not understand the distinction between planning and scheduling. So they just do it all, they just mash it together, just put it all at the same time. So they use these boards with the dates, and they start to plan and schedule at the same time, assuming that pool planning and scheduling are the same things. And in doing so, is not clear about level of clarity that the items are, the activities are, and it's not clear about the level of commitments that the team has about this, right? So we want to separate them. So really, you want to do this instead, right? You want to separate planning, scheduling, and communicating, because these are different meetings and these are different activities. And the number one complaint that I see from people with last planner system is that it takes too long to do the meetings, or takes too long to do the pool planning session. People say, I don't have 4 hours or 8 hours to do pool planning. It only takes you so long because you're not separating them into the very precise and concise meetings that they are. You should not have a 4-hour pool planning session. It should be like an hour, because you have to understand what milestones you're working within, who's working, and the people should be coming prepared before they even start the work. And at the heart of the last planner system is reliable promises and better communication, right? You want to encourage people to have the right conversations. Once you have the system running, people start to ask and talk, make requests, make promises, and really want to understand that at the end of the day, projects are based on people working together. So people are making promises and requests to each other, and this allows them to work together. This is a network of commitments. And verbal communication is also a skill that we need to develop. So we first want to develop visual communication, and then planning skills, and then verbal communication. So over time, we're looking at this not just as, do we have all these pieces in place? Do we have these pieces in place first? And then what's the quality of the conversations, the planning, the visual communication, the reliable promises that we're having with the team? So we first look at quantity first, just to make sure that we actually have what we're missing into the system. And then we focus on the quality of our conversations and the quality of things that we're working on. So the way that I see this is that planning is actually more social than people realize. And because the person who does the work has to be the one that makes the promise. Because you put it on the plan or the schedule, but the person doesn't commit to it, it doesn't happen. And people always ask me, okay, if I have people plan the work, how do I know that it's optimal, as opposed to me planning by myself? And my answer is very simple. And you have people plan the work, and it's visually communicated, and I understand what's going on, I can ask questions. As long as I can ask questions, I can ensure that it's optimal. If I can't ask questions or understand what's going on or visually see it, there's no way for me to understand that it's optimal. So somebody who works alone in the office, creating the CPM schedule, may say that they have an optimal schedule. But the question is that, if people don't understand it, they don't commit to it, and they can't ask questions on it, is it really optimal? So there's a different sense of optimality in people thinking that it's a mathematical problem. It's not an algorithm or mathematical problem. It's a social problem that you can, once you have the social people working on a project plan together, and you can start talking about the right things and important things, then you will actually improve the plan over time. And that's what we're trying to do, right? We want to have a plan that we understand and people can do. And then we improve it over time. Because with CPM, it doesn't have these social components to it. So your plan is, it's imaginary, and it may not actually happen that way. So why do you want to use the last planner system? You want to, higher productivity, less waste, more reliable schedules. You get safer projects, better morale and higher engagement, and you get better customer satisfaction because you're actually aligning how you're doing the work and when you're doing the work with your client's goals, milestones, and objectives. And where can you use it? You can use it in design phase. So a lot of times the teams are using this to manage how they're working together on design phases and design milestones and permitting. You can use it for construction. You can use it for general project management. It doesn't even have to be construction project. It could be software engineering. And I would say that anytime you have more than 3 people working together, you should use the last planner system. If you have 2 people working together, you can just make commitments, and you can talk about what you're doing as commitments. But when you have 3 or more people, then you need to make the information more visual, and you need to work together to identify the work that's taking place ahead of time. And what should you focus on to be successful? I would focus on reliable handoffs between the trades, the flow in between the work, communication, so making sure that people understand how to make promises and how to keep promises. I would focus on how to display the information, because if you can't see it or understand it, I don't think anyone else can see it and understand it. You want to have one plan for the entire project. Your problems and constraints have to be clearly identified and taken care of way before the work starts. You want to also focus on learning and improving every day, having the right buffers and schedule contingency. And then you have to train every project like it's your first project. You can't assume that people come into these projects knowing how to do things, because on average, people work in this industry for about 20 years in the projects. And after 20 years, they get to a management position where they may not work in the project anymore. So most teams have to be trained for every new project that they're working on. And a lot of teams use Scrum for the weekly and daily sprints, very acceptable. So again, there's different variations to how you apply this, and you can use a Scrum board, digital or in-person board, to manage the weekly and daily tasks. And that's a very good way of understanding what work needs to be done, and also having one board for the whole team. So there's different levels of capabilities with last planner system, right? So what we're seeing here is that with Lean, there's different levels of capabilities and understanding about how to do things. So the very first level of last planner system is just having the PPC, tracking activities that are planned versus completed. That's the very first level of learning. As you get better, you then also do your waste walks and video studies, because now you understand that there is an understanding about what the work is going to be like and what you're expecting to be done, right? But we have to verify with data. So once you have a level of stability in your project, you can record different crews and different types of work taking place and seeing where you can find opportunities for improvement. So this is level 2 in terms of learning. Level 2 also includes understanding and implementing the 10 wastes. So wastes are the 8 wastes, Muda, Muri, and Mura. And the goal of this process is to identify the wastes in conjunction with your video studies. And again, we don't teach the 8 wastes or 10 wastes until we teach last planner system, because in design construction projects, planning and scheduling is the backbone of your project. That's the most important thing, because everything else is built around your planning and scheduling. And then level 3 is where you look into the root cause analysis. When something does not occur, you want to ask why. So this is where we're starting to teach plan, do, check, act. We're trying to teach people to do root cause analysis, the 5 whys. These are all very, very important techniques for understanding the root cause of how things are. So this is a level 3 level in terms of learning. So the teams generally start with level 1, and then we graduate them onto level 2 and level 3. And then some people say, okay, I work, solo as a trade. I'm doing a mechanical trade, electrical trade. I'm doing a drywall trade. Can I apply last planner system for myself? The answer is absolutely. So we're gonna watch a video from BZI. BZI is a steel erector company out in Utah, and they're very successful. And they use last planner system for their projects. So let's kind of watch this video together. Do you hear the audio?
With the construction of taller, multi-level warehouse and distribution centers, material selection has shifted from concrete, precast, and tilt wall products to insulated metal panels, or IMPs. Current IMP installation methods present schedule challenges for concurrent and following trades because access to work zones are not available until that portion of the IMP scope is complete. Our new IMP installation system is a revolutionary process designed to enhance safety, efficiency, and simplicity in assembling and installing IMP walls. Building on our patented panelization technology, a complete IMP wall module can now be assembled at ground level and installed in a way that improves schedule and construction sequencing. The IMP system consists of a panel table, a material lift arm, and gantry, as well as high lift panel jacks that elevate the panel to 11 feet. Other specialized accessories include the IMP bunk handling attachment for the forklift, spreader bar for the crane, and finally, the wall master. Construction of an IMP wall module begins long before material delivery or other activities happen on site. To enable this system, our teams work closely with the project engineer. A steel tube substructure that supports the insulated metal panels is engineered, as well as the connections needed. IMP lengths are detailed to meet specific wall section designs. On site, a moving gantry at the panel table supports the IMP material, allowing the lift arm to set each panel into place in an efficient and safe manner. The panel jacks then raise the completed module to provide access for the wall master to connect beneath. After being transported to the crane's position, the wall master rotates and tilts the module to hand off the wall section to the crane. Team members make the final connections to the building once the module is lifted to its final position. Advantages in using this new process are evident, but to touch on a few of the most important points, we begin with safety. Bringing the wall assemblies to ground level drastically reduces aerial time on the project. The ironworker team benefits as many of the steel components that support the IMP at the building perimeter are incorporated into the panel substructure. The IMP team benefits by completing their work at ground level. Materials can be safely handled and installed in a controlled and ergonomic manner, reducing fatigue and other injury risks. Efficiency gains through more productive workflow translate into shorter durations for the overall IMP scope, and closing the building perimeter faster. Another schedule advantage can be gained in site logistics, as most of the assemblies can be completed away from the building perimeter, improving access for multiple trades and optimizing material staging. And finally, our panelization process contributes to a more simplified perimeter wall system design, removing complex parapet assemblies and wall girts that often affect multiple finishing scopes and present sequencing challenges throughout the construction process. safety, efficiency, and simplicity.
So as you can see, there is a way to use this internally. Even if the general contractor or the owner isn't involved in the last planner process, you can apply it within your own company. So today was an introduction, right? So this is really the executive education of last planner system. But there's going to be, as you apply more of this, there are going to be topics that we don't cover today that you may need to look into. But I just want to put the list here for you to be aware of, right? Because the first thing we want to do is make sure that the teams are applying these components, getting to level 3 learning. And then they want to look into all these other topics, like language action perspective, right? What is the actual reliable promise? There's a whole body of language and knowledge about how to make promises and work on teams with promises, right? So we're looking, once you start to understand language action perspective more, you're seeing that it's actually committing to promises rather than activities or tasks. So in the beginning, people were still thinking about activities and tasks, but over long enough time of applying last planner system, they start to understand that it's actually about making promises and keeping promises. You're also going to see how you can integrate last planner with Scrum and TAC. All three are complementary and they work together. And you got to understand where to use them and how to use them and use them together to create one plan for the project. As you get better, you're going to learn how to do last planner and design. Again, this requires more experience, but there's a lot of benefits to planning your design process and making sure that your teams are producing to what you need to have for your permits. And we want to move beyond PPC, right? Because PPC as a metric alone can be gamed. Because if you tell people to have an 80% PPC, they can break the task down in a way that they'll always get at least 80%. And as you start to do this more, you make it into a habit. So easiest way to make it into a habit is look at a calendar and say, how are you scheduling different components of last planner system in your project? And how is this occurring on a weekly basis for you to see the whole system? Buffers and management of last planner system, you're going to have uncertainties you need to manage. And you need to have a way to actually assign the buffers for that work. This is a more advanced topic. And the buffers have to match the level of unpredictability of your project. So it's hard to give an answer for all projects, but it's something to be aware of. And over time, you're going to learn that you can identify how people are thinking about the project and the plan based on the moods. And one of your jobs is really to ensure that they're having a positive mood and a collaborative mood. So even when the times are stressful or chaotic, they're still working together and seeing a positive future for the project. Because as soon as people have negative moods or see that there's going to be a bad future for the project, they're not going to work together. So moods and buffers is really how you ensure that the project is reliable, even when something goes wrong. And the way that I see last planner is that, yes, it's a series of steps, but longer term is not actually a series of components or things you put into place, right? It's not a checklist. It's a set of skills that you need to develop and get better at. So visual management is a skill. Master planning facilitation is a skill. How to do pool planning and facilitation is a skill. How well you do daily huddles is a skill. Look ahead and constraint removal is a skill. Make ready and reliable promises is a skill. Identifying waste, root cause analysis, and even teaching other people is a skill. So typically when a team is doing, let's say, daily huddles, right? They could record the daily huddles and send it to your internal coach in your company. And that internal coach can identify where they can improve the daily huddles. So all these things are different skills you develop. So it's not that you're putting all the components of last planner system in place, that you're done. You have to think of them as skills that you get better over time. And really, lean in the short term is, people think it's quantitative, but really it's qualitative, because when you want to improve your car, you're not going to have more than 4 wheels, right? You're going to make slight improvements, and over time, those improvements will lead to a higher performing team and a higher performing project. And it's really about the quality over time, not just the quantity. And we want to make this a habit, right? And so you're only going to be as good as your habits. And when you're deploying this the first time, I would start with one component at a time Make it a habit before you add in more things together. So the most difficult part about last planner system is that you're going to a project halfway through, or you're in this construction phase and they're not using last planner system. What do you do to get the teams to apply it? I would first create a stability for the project. Start with look aheads and daily huddles and constraint removal, just to create a stability for the first week, then the first month, then the first 3 months. And once you have a 3 month stability of the project, you can then start doing your phase planning and your master planning. So the goal is that in the very beginning, people are not going to do all this at once, and you can't get them to do this at once. You want to create stability first so that they see that this is going to improve their projects. And then you add in more and more components over time. So when you're actually applying lean in the project, you're not going to only be using stickies. So we taught you in the beginning stickies because this is the analog version. This is the version that can be used on all projects. But in most projects nowadays, we're going to use digital, analog, and hybrid. And we have to use technology to help us, especially when the project is very big, has a lot of people, has a lot of activities, tens of thousands of activities. We can't just use sticky notes because once a sticky note falls down, we lose some information, right? So realistically, what we see on projects is that the parts that should be analog should be the last planner, the master planning, and then phase planning. You have to get people in the room, put them on stickies and commit. But the parts that can be digital would be look ahead, make ready, weekly commitments, daily huddles. These things can be digital, and there's a lot of technology right now that you can choose. These are just 6 options, but you choose whatever option you want to use, and you want to have one software for the entire project, and that's the goal, right? The goal is to choose one platform and have some of it digital, some of it analog. In the beginning, you can do it all of it analog, and then you shift to a digital solution if you want to. Let me see, continue. And yeah, I do have the ebook. And if you want to learn more about the ebook as we're going through the training, you can download the ebook in one of the 3 languages that we have available. And one thing that I want to tell to most teams and most people is that last planner system is not lean construction, right? Last planner system is one of the methods of lean construction. And just having 1 star in the night sky is not the entire night sky. So what we want to tell people is that we highly recommend you start with last planner system, but just doing last planner system does not mean that you're doing lean, because there's still more that we can do, and there's more methods that solve particular problems. We want to start here first, and then allow the teams to do things like TAC, choosing by advantages, target value delivery. There's a lot more ideas that we can implement, but this is a very good place to start, and this is why we're starting today. And there's different ways of doing, deploying lean. And for last planner, most of it is going to be DIY. You can have internal coaching. Most companies and organizations should have an internal coaching or a regional manager that helps someone experienced, right? You cannot have your lean manager be someone that just graduated from college. We've seen a lot of companies try this. It doesn't work. You have to have someone who actually has experience and to coach the teams and to be able to do the assessment of the teams. But last planner system is something that most organizations need to have the skill of. And you could have external, but you still have to have internal capabilities for your projects. So this is where we are. So we're at the end of the 2nd webinar. So next time we're going to talk about TAC, then we talk about TBD, then we talk about IPD and progressive design build, and then we're going to talk about the history and development of lean construction. Over time, it gets more and more technical. So this is the very first technical webinar. The first one we did was more high level understanding about what lean is, the vocabulary, and what we would get if we apply this correctly. This is the first one where we went in depth and try to explain how to do a method. And in the next couple of webinars, we're also going to be more technical as well. So the capabilities and the content gets more technical. So that's why we build our foundations over time to understand these things. And we do have a last planner system conference in April in San Francisco. It's going to be in person as well as going to be live streamed. So you can attend either in person or you can attend remotely. And I can talk about this later after our Q&A and show you some of the website and the program. But right now I want to go to questions and answers, and feel free to ask any questions. And I think that there's some questions in the chat box that we can go through. So I have some questions. I'm going to stop my share, then go through the questions.